Get started.
At the end of that last statement you made, you could have given altar call.
Well, I don't want this to be merely academic.
Yeah. That's a profound thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Puts a new spin on it. To us, anyway.
Well, some people I've read commentaries on Genesis by conservative evangelical scholars, godly men, and they rejected the interpretation that I took because how could God die? But the Bible it's like an ordinary novel. There are tensions in the plot structure, and you have to allow those tensions in the plot structure to stand. God intends for you to be on the edge of your chair for a while to see how this is going to work out.
It's uncomfortable.
All right. So let's see. Let me see. Okay. Let's go to a slideshow from the current slide. All right, we've dealt with, I've argued that there's a creation covenant. I didn't deal with the covenant with Noah, but I've argued that God is reaffirming his creation covenant. And if you look at the details in chapter 9, God gives the very same commission that he gave to Adam, he gives to Noah. It's modified slightly in a fallen world, but it's the same. He's given the same commission that Adam is given. And then we have Abram, and we see that God has narrowed the focus down to one man, but he's got the whole world in view because God wants to save the whole world through Abram's family. So when I went to seminary, the professor said, "How odd of God to choose the Jews." Well, if you read the text carefully, it's not only the first three promises are about Abram. The last three promises are the whole world. That's you and me. That's the Gentiles being blessed through Abram's family. All right, central to the book of Exodus and indeed to the entire Pentateuch is the covenant made between Yahweh and Israel at Sinai, comprised in Exodus chapters 19 to 24. The 18 chapters before describe the release of Israel from bondage and slavery in Egypt and the journey through the wilderness to Sinai. So the first 18 chapters is how they get out of Egypt and get to Sinai. And then the covenant is chapters 19 to 24. And then chapters 25 to 40 are devoted to the construction of a place of worship as the appropriate recognition of the divine kingship established through the covenant. I hope you see a parallel here between what's happening here and Genesis 1 and 2. So God makes a covenant with Adam and Eve, and the appropriate response to that is worship in a mountain sanctuary. God makes a covenant with Israel, and the appropriate response to that is worship in a mountain sanctuary. So you see the parallels. A much bigger claim, however, can be made for Exodus 19 to 24. This unit is called the Book of the Covenant by Moses himself. The Book of the Covenant, along with the Book of Deuteronomy, as an addition to the covenant. So if you look at chapter 29, if you look at Deuteronomy, chapter 29, verse 1, Let's actually look at that so you can see it yourself. These are the words of the covenant which Yahweh commanded Moses to cut with the sons of Israel in the land of Moab. Now look at this. Beside, or in addition to, or as a supplement to the covenant which he cut with them at Horeb. Horeb is another name for Sinai. Does everyone see that? The book of Deuteronomy is an addition or a supplement. We'll talk about that. So this part of the Bible forms the heart of the Old Covenant, and it is in the interpretation of the relationship of the Old Covenant to the New that is the basis of all the major divisions among Christians. That is, all the denominational differences are in one way or another due to different understandings of how we are to relate to the Old Covenant. Okay, Exodus 19 to 24 within the larger story of Scripture. We showed from Genesis 1, 26 to 28, the divine image is functional, relational, and structural. Speaks of human life in terms of a covenant relation with God on the one hand and with the creation on the other. The former may be expressed by the term sonship, while the latter can be expressed in terms of servant kingship. Genesis 2 shows that the Adamic son is like a priest in a garden sanctuary. He must first learn the ways of God in order to display and exercise the rule of God as God himself would. So we see the idea of kingdom through covenant. The first humans, however, rebelled against the Creator God. As a result, there is chaos, discord, and death in the creation at every level. So the whole thing went down the tubes pretty quickly. The destructive path chosen by the first humans led to a downward spiral of corruption and violence until divine intervention was required. God judged the human race by a flood and made a new start with Noah and his family. Noah is presented as a new Adam. As soon as the dry land appears out of the chaos of the floodwaters, Noah is placed there and commanded to be fruitful and multiply. That is, he is given Adam's commission or mandate. The correspondence to Genesis 1 is striking. Eventually, however, the family of Noah ends up in the same chaos and corruption as the family of the first Adam. With the Tower of Babel, the nations are lost and scattered over the face of the earth. So God makes another new start, this time with Abraham. So creation out of chaos, the chaos of Babel, you see. Abram and his family, called Israel, is another Adam who will be God's true humanity. God makes great promises to Abram in chapter 12. They're enshrined in a covenant in chapter 15, and the covenant is reaffirmed in 17 and given assured with a mighty oath in 22. So I don't have time to deal with this, but some people think that chapter 15 and 17 are two separate covenants. That is incorrect. It's wrong. Chapter 17 is using the expression establish a covenant. God is affirming the covenant that he made in chapter 15. So there aren't two Abrahamic covenants. There's only one. The Presbyterians think that there are two covenants. But if they were right, the Bible never speaks about the covenants that God made with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. It's always the covenant in the singular. So Abraham and Israel have inherited an Adamic role. Yahweh refers to the nation as his son in Exodus 4:22. Israel is my son, my firstborn son. Let my son go that he may serve me. Serve means worship. So you see, The divine purpose in the covenant established between God and Israel is explained in Exodus 19. As a kingdom of priests, they will function to make the ways of God known to the nations and also to bring the nations into a right relationship to God. Israel will display to the rest of the world within its covenant community the kind of relationships first to God and then to one another and to the physical world that God intended originally for all of humanity. In fact, through Abraham's family, God plans and purposes to bring blessing to all the nations of the world. In this way, through the family of Abraham, through Israel, his last Adam, he will bring about a resolution of the sin and death caused by the first Adam. Since Israel is located geographically on the one and only communications link between the superpowers of the ancient world, in this position she will show the world how to have a right relationship to God, how to treat each other in a truly human way, and how to be good resources of the world, how to be good stewards of the earth's resources. So now, as a cartographer, I will draw you a map. Here's a map of Israel. There you go. All right. Now, over here is Egypt, and over here is Mesopotamia, and here is the desert. All right. In the ancient world, they did not fear the C word, they feared the D word. Desert means death. So there's only one way for the superpowers of the ancient world to communicate. You have to go up to the top and come down through this little piece of land, which is 30 miles wide and 90 miles long. Okay? This isn't even as wide as the city of Toronto. So what I'm trying to tell you is this is the backbone of the internet in the ancient world. Okay? All the communication of the world goes like this. And so God wanted Abram and his family to be seen by the whole world. All the world's passing by their doorstep. They're supposed to see what it looks like to treat God the way God should be treated, to treat other humans the way they should be treated, to be good stewards of the earth's resources, to be a light to the nations. The promises of Abraham focused on two things, descendant and land. When we come to the books of Exodus to Deuteronomy, which constitute the Mosaic covenant or covenant with Israel, we have the fulfillment of these promises. First, God has greatly increased the descendants of Abraham so that they are innumerable. Second, they're like the sand on the seashore. Second, he has given them the land of Canaan. But God's plan and purpose has not changed. He wants to bless the descendants of Abraham and through them the whole world. In fact, his plan is to restore his broken and ruined creation through Israel. As they come out of Egypt and before they enter the land, God makes an agreement with Israel. The purpose of this agreement or covenant is to enable them to enjoy the blessings he wants to give them and be the blessing to the nations. This covenant will show them how to be his true humanity. All right, the literary structure. How do we begin? We always begin with a literary structure. And I put it down here. Let's see if I can. So, there are 4 parts to the text. Chapter 19 is the background. Okay, it's the background. Chapter 20 is what you would call the 10 Commandments. I'm going to shock you. They're never called the 10 Commandments in the Bible, in the Old Testament. They're called the 10 words. But I want you to look at your Bible so you see it. You see what I'm talking about. Chapter 20, verse 1. Yeah, I'm in the wrong book. Got to get in the right book. Chapter 20, verse 1. And God spoke all these words. Do you see that? So, and then if you look at, then you have the 10 Commandments. Chapter 21 says, verse 1, And these are the judgments. I don't know what your translation has. Ordinances, rules. Laws. Okay. The Hebrew word is actually judgments. Well, and we will see why they're called judgments in a moment. All right? And we're going to, so these are the two parts. These are the two parts, the words and the judgments. This is not Peter Gentry speaking. These are the actual headings in the text. Okay? The precise expression, the Ten Commandments, occurs nowhere in the Old Testament, although in a general way, the 10 words are included when references is made to the commands of Yahweh. They are frequently referred to as commandments in the New Testament, and that is why the preferred term today is the Ten Commandments. So first we have just the words, then in Exodus 21 to 23 we have the judgments. Not only the headings, but also the contents. The contents. So chapter 24, we'll get there, is the covenant ratification ceremony. The ceremony that it's like a wedding ceremony. It's the ceremony that ratifies the covenant. So here's the headings. God spoke all these words, and these are the judgments. Now I want you to look, we're going to go to chapter 24. We're going to go to chapter 24. Let's see, where are the contents? Okay, the commandments, let's discuss this quickly. The commandments are absolute commands. They're usually in the second person singular. We're gonna talk about that. Why are they in the second person singular? They're general injunctions, not related to a specific social situation. So thou shalt not kill. Not now, not today, not this week, not this month, not this year, never. As a general rule, never. Okay? They're general commands. And they're what we would call prescriptive law, because no fines or punishments are mentioned. The ordinances or judgments are case decisions, case laws, or precedents. You know what a precedent is? Roe versus Wade. That's a precedent, right? So they discussed a problem in court, and this was the verdict that was given, and now it becomes a precedent that directs and guides and leads people after that precedent is set. The fundamental principles embodied in the Ten Commandments are now applied in particular social settings. So what does it mean? What do the 10 words look like on a day-to-day basis in practical life? And they're what we would call descriptive law, imposing fines and punishments. They're usually presented as conditional sentences. You know, a conditional sentence is a sentence with an if clause and a then clause. If this is the case, then this is what you should do. So if a guy has an ox and he gores a human, then this is what you should do. Okay? Now we'll go back. We're going to look at chapter 24 and see how these two things work out, because this is really important. So these two distinct sections to the covenant are clearly referred to in chapter 24, where the covenant ratification ceremony is described. So I hope you have your Bible open at chapter 24. Note carefully the particular terms used in verses 1 to 8 of chapter 24 as follows. Chapter 24, verse 1, according to the clause pattern in the Hebrew text, as well as the topic, connects and directly follows chapter 20, verses 21 and 22. In verse 21 to 26 of chapter 20 and verses 1 and 2 of chapter 24, Yahweh speaks to Moses from the cloud on Mount Sinai. So you see, this was high technology. Information came from the cloud. And gives instruction concerning altars and who will ascend the mountain for the covenant ratification meal. In chapter 24, verse 3, Moses comes and gives a report to the people. And Moses came and reported to the people. Look at this verse. And Moses came and reported to the people all the words and all the judgments. Did you hear that? He's referring to the two sections. The words are chapter 20, and the judgments are 21 to 23. Do you see that? So they aren't just Gentry's headings. These are the headings in the text, and these are the headings that Moses is referring to. And all the people responded with one voice, all the words which Yahweh has spoken we will do. Notice that Moses reported all the words and all the judgments. These two terms clearly refer to the 10 words in chapter 20 and the judgments in 21 to 23. Now, when the people say all the words which Yahweh has spoken we will do, probably the words is an abbreviation of the words and the judgments. Similarly, in verse 4, Moses wrote all the words. Here again, the words is a short way of saying the words and the judgments. This is actually very typical in Hebrew literature. So, for example, when the Jewish people do not have a word like we do for the Bible. Okay? They call it the Tanakh, which is an acronym. The T stands for Torah or law. The N stands for Nevi'im or prophets. And the K stands for Ketuvim or writings. Okay? So when they talk about their Bible, they talk about the law and the prophets and the writings. And that gets a little bit tedious to say. So you shorten it to the law and the prophets. And if you're still out of breath, you say the law, meaning the whole Bible. And that's why in the New Testament, Paul says, as it says in the law, and he quotes from the book of Isaiah. He's not stupid. He knows that that's not the Moses' Torah. But he's using law as a short form for the law and the prophets and the writings. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's what's happening here. In verse 4, words is a short form for words and judgments. Similarly, in verse 4, yes. So, all right. And when we get to verse 7, Moses calls this the book of the covenant. Okay? So, what I'm trying to show you is the book of the covenant. It's a book, and it has two parts. All right? The covenant has two parts. It has the 10 words, and it has the judgments. This is very, very important because when people talk about what's my relationship to the covenant, to the Mosaic covenant, they're going to say, well, you should keep the 10 commandments, but you don't have to keep all those other laws. I'm sorry, the covenant is the words and the judgments. You either buy the whole package or you don't buy the package. It's a package deal, and that's very clear from this text. And you should be able to see that what the judgments are doing is they're just showing you how the 10 words work out in practical and particular situations. But the two go together. The two go together. All right. This is really the hardest lecture that I'm giving today. It won't be so difficult to talk about the Davidic covenant. It won't be so difficult to talk about. I will have to highly abbreviate things, but I mean, the new covenant is discussed in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and all the minor prophets, but I'll just focus on one passage, Jeremiah 31. But there's a lot to talk about here and get it all done in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But we'll do okay, don't worry.
I'm picking up pizza, so I'll take till 12. There you go.
All right. In chapter 19, we have the setting in space and time. We have the divine purpose of the covenant in verses 3 to 8. We have the human preparation. How did they prepare? How did they prepare for God's revelation? And then we see God revealing himself in verses 19 to 25. So, we're going to look for a moment. We're going to look for a moment. I'm going to do this in my own words, which will make it easy you won't have to listen to these academic words. And I'll try to summarize this. Verse 3, Exodus 19, verse 4. You have seen what I did to Egypt, and I lifted you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, if you will fully obey my voice and keep my covenant, you will be for me a special treasure more than all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. All the other nations are called peoples here. It's interesting. And you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to Israel. What we see here is the purpose of the covenant from God's point of view. All right? The purpose of the covenant from God's point of view. And I'm going to show you how this works. Notice verse 4. Notice verse 4. You yourselves saw what I did to Egypt and how I lifted you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Okay? What is he talking about here in this verse?
Judge.
It's a summary of the whole Exodus, isn't it? It's a summary of all those plagues, what I did to Egypt. And you've seen that movie, The Lord of the Rings, how Gandalf is rescued by the eagles. So this is Moses was ahead of Tolkien. So what you see here is God bringing them through the Red Sea and giving them bread. Bread rained from heaven every day. Their clothes didn't wear out. He provided water from the rock every day. He beat off their enemies. They had to stay with the cloud and the pillar of fire. That was what I call toddler training, because they're in the desert. You know what it means to be in the desert? It means that it goes to 120 degrees in the daytime, and it could be minus 30 the next night. Okay? So, if you want to stay alive, you stay with the cloud and the fire, because the cloud protects you from the heat of the sun, and the fire keeps you warm at night. All right. So if you want to follow Yahweh, stay close. This is God's toddler training. Where God gives a command, like you say to the toddler, don't touch that stove. Well, they're going to run over, but you're going to go and pick them up and pull them away, right? So, God's toddler training. He calls it the discipline of the Lord in Deuteronomy chapter 11. So what am I saying here? This covenant was not given to a group of people in order to save them. It was given to a group of people who were already saved, already redeemed. Okay, that's fundamental. You should see that right here. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So, the law of Moses was never given to save anyone. It was given to a group of people who were already redeemed to show them how to live and how to be a light to the nations. And so I show this. You see, God's grace Israel's obedience is demanded, and as a result, they become his people. So there's a lot of when you read what people say on the covenants, there's a lot of mistaken ideas, because people will contrast law and grace. Have you heard people contrast law and grace? Every covenant in the Bible is based on grace. It's based on the gift from God. And every covenant has a requirement, a demand for obedience. So these categories are not really helping us sort out what the Bible is really saying. All right. Now, very quickly, there are two sentences here. The first sentence is, you will become a special treasure. A special treasure. Here. I'll just write down the word treasure. Treasure. And you will be a kingdom of priests. A kingdom of priests. Of priests and a holy nation. Now, it would be great it would be wonderful if we had like an hour and a half in the book. I basically take almost an hour to identify this, but I want to show you the structure. First of all, remember how Hebrew literature is based on repetition? So here's the left speaker, and here's the right speaker, okay? But the right speaker has a left speaker and a right speaker, okay? So this is how Hebrew literature works. You can have, the repetition can be recursive, you see? So kingdom of priests and holy nation, you put that together, it's the right speaker for treasure. And I have a major discussion of these terms. I show you what does special treasure mean. Well, it actually has the idea of being a devoted son or daughter and serving God in worship. Those are ideas that are involved in the word treasure in the ancient Near East. And then here you have kingdom of priests. And I discuss that. The word kingdom may refer to a domain or realm that is ruled, or to the exercise of kingly rule and sovereignty. According to the main options, kingdom of priests could mean a domain of priests whom God rules, or alternatively, the exercise of royal office by those who are in fact priests. And it's difficult to decide between these two readings because of the grammar in the text. In the latter option, understanding priests as a genitive of apposition after the collective kingdom would be a more natural reading than to construe it as an attributive genitive. Thus, we may view in priests a collective reference to all Israel as being in some sense priests, rather than being a priestly kingship or a priestly royalty. Perhaps both meanings are intended, so that both the relationship between God and Israel and the relationship between Israel and the world is indicated. So, kingdom of priests could be telling us that this is a group of people who have a special relationship to God. They're worshiping God, but also they are bringing others into the presence of God. So it could have both ideas in it. And holy nation. I was invited to go to a Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and give these special lectures on biblical theology. I spoke for 2 hours on the meaning of the word holy. Okay, so the word holy, we're told that it means to be set apart. This is incorrect. It's based on etymology, and it's based on an etymology that no one believes today. The way you determine the meaning of a word is to show how it's used. And the word means consecrated to, devoted to, belonging to. And so they're a nation, a group, a kingdom, a group of people with governmental, political, and social structure. that is completely devoted to God. So you can see that these are different ways, these really are different ways of looking at the same thing, and that together, this is another way of talking about the treasure. All right. Now, some things very, very quickly. We're told that there are 10 words, but we're not shown how to number them. And there are different ways in which they're numbered. The Protestants, the Catholics, and the Jewish people. And I show you the right way to number them. Why are there 10 words? Why are there 10 words? Do you know why there are 10 words? Because when in Genesis chapter 1, when it says, and God said, that occurs 10 times. So the creation was made by 10 words of God. And the creation of Israel is made by 10 words of God.
Not by accident.
No. So the whole world hangs on the word of God, and the nation of Israel hangs on the word of God. So we could look at these commands. We could look in the book and in the big book and in the abridgment. I have a big discussion of the first 3 commands because they're not very well understood by Christians today, and I don't have time to go into that. But the first 3 commands have to do with loving God, and the last 7 commands have to do with loving our neighbor as ourselves. This isn't Peter Gentry speaking. This is how Moses himself summarized it in Leviticus. So Jesus was right. Naturally, Jesus was right. He knew the text. Yeah. Yeah, but you see what I'm showing you. What I'm showing you is if I need to figure out how Jesus got there. You see what I mean?
Right. He didn't make it up himself.
No, and I'm going to show you in a minute or two. We could see these commands as the right of every person. So, thou shalt not murder, the right of every person to his own life. Thou shalt not commit adultery, the right of every person to their own home. Thou shalt not steal, the right of every person to their own property. Thou shalt not bear false witness, the right of every person to their own reputation. So why aren't they described as rights, positive rights? Why are they described negatively? And why are they, instead of in the plural, this is what you all should do, why are they in the second person singular? Well, I think the reason for that is you need to think about the right of the other person.
These are their rights too.
Yeah, you see? All right, there's a lot I could say here. And I'm going to skip over it. I'm going to go to the literary structure of Deuteronomy. The literary structure of Deuteronomy. Let's hope this. So, you know, when this is a really important part, and we're actually going to finish maybe a few minutes early, so there'll be room for questions, and I can go back over material.
He said keep on going until they get back.
Okay, so let's see where we are here. I don't know if women buy china anymore. They used to buy.
Can't get rid of it either.
They used to buy china when they got married. And what I was going to say is, in China there are fashions. There are fashions. They change every decade. So if you pick up a piece of china, you can date it.
Yeah.
So my wife, we were in Scotland, and we were with friends, and they were beachcombers. So we went down to the beach to find pieces of china and broken glass. They had a convention for these people. Do you know how many people attended the convention? Take a guess. 100. 15,000. 15,000. And all these people do is pick up china and broken glass. Barb picks up this piece of china and the guy says, Leeds, 1922. Okay? So you can, there's changes in the fashions down through the centuries. There are covenants or international treaties in the ancient Near East have a literary structure, and that structure changes down through the centuries. The book of Deuteronomy has the literary structure of a Hittite treaty from the 14th century BC. It doesn't have the structure of the Neo-Assyrian treaties from the 7th century, where the liberals want to date the book.
Doesn't fit.
So, here's the structure of a Hittite suzerain vassal treaty.
Wasn't it Meredith Klein that was?
Meredith Klein was big on this, but now Kenneth Kitchen has a 3-volume set, which I own, costs $600. Every covenant, every treaty, every law code in the ancient Near East, its literary structure is analyzed for 3 millennia. So we have all the data now, okay?
I thought Meredith Klein was
Yep.
the first one to point this
Yeah,
out.
well, he was the first evangelical to point this out. So, there's an introduction, there's a history of the past relations between the parties, then we have the stipulations in the treaty, the commands in the treaty. There's always a general command to be loyal to the great king, and then there's the details of how you're going to be loyal to the great king, and then there's the deposition of the document, its public reading, the blessings and the curses, and the solemn oath ceremony. Okay? And the book of Deuteronomy has exactly the same structure. All right? So you won't believe this. This will lift you right off your chair. So the book of Deuteronomy, verses 1 to 5 is the introduction. Chapter 1, verse 6 to 4:43 is the history of the relationship between the two parties. Then you have the stipulations, the general stipulation and the detailed stipulations. The general stipulation is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. You know what? Jesus was right. It's the first and the greatest commandment, because it follows the Hittite treaty structure. So this is how we start with Jesus and the apostles and figure out how they came to their conclusions. All right? And then you have the deposition of the document, the public reading, the blessings and the curses, and the solemn oath ceremony. Now, this is one of the most important parts of this lecture. And it's at the end of the chapter on Exodus, and it's at the end of the chapter on Deuteronomy. So, these are the Hittite treaties right there. There's Exodus and Deuteronomy. So you can see, Exodus and Deuteronomy. The only difference, and here are the later Assyrian treaties, and Sephiri are Aramaic treaties from the 5th century, and these are the Assyrian treaties from the 7th century. So you can see that Exodus and Deuteronomy follow the structure of the 14th century and not the 7th, 6th, and 5th century. So all of my professors at the University of Toronto believe that the book of Deuteronomy came from the 5th century. I've been fighting this my whole life, man. So there's my answer. All right, now I want you to look at this one. We have law codes from the ancient Near East. the laws of Ur-Nammu, the laws of Libet Ishtar, the laws of Eshnunna, the Code of Hammurabi. Everyone here has heard about Hammurabi, okay? The Middle Assyrian laws and the Old Hittite laws. Now, this is the structure of the law code. This is the structure of the law code. This is the structure of the treaties, and here's the structure of Deuteronomy. What do we learn from this? Okay, this is really very, very important. Just as in Exodus 19 to 24, the 10 words are foundational to the judgments, and conversely, the judgments applied and extended the 10 words in a practical way to all areas of life, so in Deuteronomy, the specific stipulations in chapters 12 to 26 illustrate application and extension of the basic requirement of loyalty, love the Lord your God, and the review of the 10 words to various areas of life in Iron Age culture. Now, some people, I have to go back to the section on Exodus here. I've got time to do this. It's common for people to say, well, the 10 Commandments, they're eternal, and the judgments are just temporal. You see? Because they want to say, well, you have to follow the 10 Commandments, but you don't have to follow the judgments. That doesn't work because the covenant is the words and the judgments. So you can't take part of the package and not take the whole package. If you want people to follow the Mosaic covenant, they have to follow the whole ball of wax. You see what I'm trying to say? Secondly, it's common for people to classify the law into moral, ceremonial, and civil. And they'll say, well, we don't have to follow the moral and the ceremonial and civil laws, but we have to follow the moral law, okay? But those categories are imposed upon the text from the outside. If you read the judgments in Exodus 21 to 23, they're not organized into moral, ceremonial, and civil. If you read Deuteronomy 12 to 26, it's not organized into moral, civil, and ceremonial. And even the 10 words are not organized that way, because the Sabbath is a ceremonial law. In fact, in Exodus 31, it's called the sign of the covenant. It's a covenant sign. And that's why there's such... I deal with the Sabbath here, and I don't have time to deal with it today. But the point is, that's why Christians are always debating the Sabbath, because they don't understand what's the relationship of the Mosaic covenant to me. You see? So the 10 words are not all moral. There's a ceremonial law stuck right in the middle. So what do we learn when we compare these? When we compare them, we're going to see two things. Number one, in content, the biblical documents are identical to ancient Near Eastern law codes, but they do not have the form of a law code. So when you read the Code of Hammurabi, you will see the same laws. You won't see thou shalt have no other gods before me. You won't see bearing the name falsely, and you won't see the Sabbath. But everything else about murder, adultery, stealing, all of that is in all of those laws. So there's nothing new, okay, in that part. So the content of the Mosaic covenant, apart from those first commands, is identical to the content in the law codes, but it's not in the form of a law code. It's in the form of a covenant. So that's the second point. In form, the biblical documents are identical to ancient Near Eastern covenants or international treaties, but not in content. So what does this tell us? This is very important. God desires to rule in the midst of his people as king, but he wants to direct, guide, and instruct their lives and their lifestyles. So the Hebrew word Torah does not mean law. It means instruction. It means direction or instruction. God wants to direct and instruct his people like a father instructs his children in a family relationship, not like a government giving impersonal laws. So the law of Moses is not like any of our law codes in the Western world. What we're going to see when we get this afternoon is that my relationship today is not I have a relationship with God, but it's not defined by the old covenant. It's defined by the new covenant. Now, does that mean that God's righteousness has changed? No, God's righteousness has not changed. But I'm not but the whole package, Hebrews says, by calling this covenant new, he has made the old one obsolete. So I'm not even under the Ten Commandments. I'm under the commands of Jesus and the apostles, where loving Jesus is the equivalent of loving God with all my heart and soul and mind and strength, and loving my neighbor and as myself is the replacement of those other commandments. So murder is still wrong, adultery is still wrong, God's righteousness hasn't changed, but the way his righteousness is packaged and defined in my relationship to him has. Does that make sense?
Same content, new package.
Well, same righteousness.
Same righteousness.
Yeah, so what I would say is this. God, what we see in Exodus and Deuteronomy is we see God's righteousness packaged for an Iron Age culture, for its mindset, its psychology, all that stuff. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Now we have the same righteousness of God packaged differently for the whole world.
In the form
The new covenant. And we're going to, so I just got you on the edge of your chair. Eat your lunch and come back. And don't fall asleep.
of more to come.